During Mrs. Lewis and Lily's discussion of Liberty's predicament in chapter 1217, her divorce and background are scrutinized. Lily remembers Liberty as Serenity's sibling, although Mrs. Lewis only briefly mentions her. In discussing Liberty's failed marriage, they dive into their prejudices and opinions. Liberty is criticized by Mrs. Lewis, who blames her divorce on her inability to love herself and be self-sufficient. She thinks Liberty's husband mistreated her, particularly by trying to divide living expenses, despite her being a housewife, and that he had an affair. Mrs. Lewis places a strong emphasis on the necessity of women retaining their financial independence within the family and valuing themselves. She criticizes Liberty's financial practices and asserts that disregarding one's beauty can result in a spouse who is less appreciative of one's efforts. Lily is reassured by Mrs. Lewis that Duncan is not that kind of man who would treat her in a similar manner. She reassures Lily that if she marries Duncan, she will be free to follow her career goals and personal interests. Lily's status inside Harmon Corporation is acknowledged by Mrs. Lewis, who is aware that the position is unlikely to be one of a traditional housewife. Despite the fact that Lily thinks Liberty looks a little fat right now, she dismisses the thought of going after Duncan herself since she thinks he would not be interested in someone like Liberty. Lily feels Duncan has a high bar for attractiveness and wonders why he would find a childbearing divorcee attractive. She believes that Duncan's consideration for Liberty and Zachary is the primary factor in his kindness to Liberty. Mrs. Lewis, on the other hand, notices Duncan's affection for Liberty's boy and feels that they have a special bond. She is taken aback by this because she never anticipated her youngest son exhibiting such love for a small youngster. On the other hand, Lily doesn't give it much thought because she finds youngsters to be universally endearing. Mrs. Lewis chooses to look into Liberty's current circumstances since she is curious. She makes contact with someone to learn more about Liberty in order to understand the dynamics between Liberty and Duncan and perhaps to learn the truth behind her divorce. The chapter investigates the prejudices and preconceptions the characters have about Liberty. The criticism of Mrs. Lewis towards Liberty and Liberty's unsuccessful union is a reflection of prevailing social norms and gender roles. Duncan must share Lily's perception of what constitutes beautiful because Lily herself upholds society norms.